Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
With technology, what the gospel is intended to do is bring hope into the space of saying, all right, yes, you're a sinner in need of grace, but you're saved by that same grace. That's what we take to technology. Like, think about that. If I used just one social media platform with that attitude, that would change the way the planet works.
His name is Nathan Sutherland, and he is the founder of Gospel Tech, which so fits in line with the Passion Meets Purpose podcast, which is all about finding what you are naturally good at, and then how do you use those talents to give back to the world. This conversation with Nathan was so fruitful because, as you can imagine, there's a lot to talk about in regards to technology and how that interacts with our faith, that we've divided it into two parts for you. This first episode is really the why behind all of it. And next week's episode is going to be a little bit more like practical application for use with your family. So both are great. And please welcome my guest, Nathan Sutherland. I like to begin with what you were like as a child, because sometimes we're able to see gifts and talents that the Lord instilled in you at a very young age and how those have really come into fruition now.
I don't think there are any of my elementary school teachers who are surprised to hear that I speak professionally now. If you were to go, oh, Nathan Sutherland, yeah, he's speaking now, they would be like, oh, I'm shocked. I was high energy, very positive. This is the same parent-teacher conference I hear with some of my own children. We're like really great with people, sometimes has a hard time sticking to the task at hand. And so growing up, I was the only boy of 5 kids. So I have 2 older sisters, 2 younger sisters, and I found my niche in being sometimes a class clown, but gregarious, sometimes people-pleasing, but always like loving to be around people, extroverted, getting energy from those experiences, even to my own detriment and the loss of my recess. And that continued as I grew up. I continued to be someone who yes, I played sports, but I was there for the people. Like, I wasn't there for the W. I was there like just to hang out and have a good time and work really hard, and I was in the school plays, and I did all those things, but people kept being my passion, which is actually what led me to being a teacher. So when I was a middle school teacher, I got into teaching because I saw my wife teaching. I went to Seattle Pacific. We were living in Ballard back when it was still like small town vibes. And I was like, man, I love seeing what she does. I went and got my master's degree. And when I went to student teach, they're like, all right, go middle school. And you will know immediately if you should be elementary or high school. Like, you'll just know. You'll know but they're like, if you're not 100% against middle schoolers, stay, because there's something broken in you. And that's the kind of person that needs to stay in middle school. So I did. I was 2 days in Puyallup, Washington, and loved it. I was like, oh my goodness, like, these people are amazing. I love that they have a sense of humor, but they're still vulnerable and like want to be known. And that's not to say that other age groups aren't, but little kids can't handle sarcasm. And that's hard. And then older kids, they kind of show you what they think you want to see. It takes a little bit more time to break through. So I would say that started way back in elementary school with my just love of being around people. And God's really used that to drive me and how I work and why I work with people now.
I've heard that about middle school before. From even when I did parent-teacher conferences when my daughter was in middle school, I remember the science teacher saying, I choose this age because you can still get them excited about science. They're not too cool yet.
Yeah.
And so he really wanted to like invest because he could see their potential, which I know is also something that's huge for you. It's like your deepest mission is to help youth reach their full potential.
Yeah. And that's the reason I woke up every morning. Like, when people would be like, oh, you're a language arts teacher. I'm like, that's like a third of what I do. Like, if you go to middle school, you're not there because you are passionate about the content, which I love language arts. I'm a double major, though, history, political science. And that was my jam. I did that for 1 year. And then there was 2008, the economy collapsed and I got laid off. And the one job offered to me was a language arts job, which I had enough credits to actually get those tests done. So I took it. I was teaching like 4 preps at the time, and I was like, great, I guess I'll just do this. And then 10 years later, I was still doing that because of the kids, because I was so passionate about seeing kids reach their potential. And I loved watching young people realize like, oh, I can read. Oh, I can understand this. Oh, I can express myself in speaking and in writing, and I can engage the world in that way. And that was so cool to watch like the lights turn on, especially in middle school. When you get these kids who have already made a narrative for themselves, they're like, I'm broken, I'm damaged, I'm too far gone. Like, I've done stupid stuff, and it's just, people told me not to, and I did it anyway. And to push them back towards hope of like, no, like that was a mistake and that is bad. And certainly there's some stuff that comes from that, but like you're not too far gone yet. Like there's always this potential. And that's really when I first stepped out of teaching and started a nonprofit and started talking to kids. There was one talk I give. I still give this talk, but it's just called the Hope Talk. And it's that little choices matter. And that's a good thing. It's not the don't make mistakes. If you're going to be a good person, just never do the wrong thing. Like, that's not the way that works. And the second is that everyone's got potential. And the third is that it's never too late to be great. And that last point really being that making a mistake doesn't make us a mistake. And that was what I loved working with middle schoolers on is like, I get it. You're at a pivotal point in your life. Like you have tons and tons of crossroads, the friends you're dating, the food you eat, your sleep habits, your study habits, the way you treat others, like all that stuff is just in development right now. Like you're just testing things out. And sometimes you're testing out at the speed of the internet. And we need to be thoughtful about like, is that the decision to make? Because sometimes it's one decision and it sends you down a path that maybe you didn't intend to be on.
It makes me think of there was a seminar that I took my daughter to, and it was geared mainly toward girls around that age. And the speaker asked all of the students, she said, thoughts, actions, consequences. Or it might have been emotions, action, consequence. I just know that actions and consequences were in there. But the first one, and she said, can we control our thoughts? Can we control our emotions? And it was interesting. You would look around the room and they were trying to come up with the right answer. You know, they were trying to, do I nod or do I shake my head, you know?
Yeah.
And she was like, no, sometimes emotions, sometimes thought just come in. You know, we don't always control those. Can we control our actions? And the same disillusioned look went around the room. They did not know if we are in control of our actions.
Yeah.
And that was an eye-opener for me because of course we're in control of our actions, you know, but to them, it was not obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think giving them that encouragement of a lot of times when we share that, it's almost condemning. It's like, because you made a mistake, you were in control. And now that almost like defines you. Like now you're a person who does this thing, right? You're a kid that fails. You're a kid that makes mistakes. You're a kid that got suspended. And I love flipping that and being like, no, like there are choices now in front of you. Like, what are you going to do with the mistakes you've already made? Like, and that's where the gospel is amazing in this. But to understand, like, you're not defined by your mistakes. Like, you're defined by whose you are, not who you are. And that is the identity you need to be living out of. And so being able to speak to young people, this is the reason I stopped teaching, was recognizing, man, like language arts is really cool, but I'm so limited in what I want to be able to talk about. I signed a contract saying I would teach to build a fire or whatever story it is. I actually need to like step out and be able to talk to kids about a wider range. And so it started with the bigger nonprofit, Flint and Iron, where we go, all right, we're going to talk about sparking purpose in youth and kids, seeing their potential and sharing broad spectrum hope. And then we're like, you know what, we need to share the gospel explicitly. And that's where Gospel Tech came from, of this idea of like, all right, let's take the gospel and just drill deep in one really niche category. And technology was that one, to see kids not follow the rules of the Old Testament just because they're rules, but understand God's love and where rules come from in love, that these are God's best plan for you. What does it look like now to live from the hope you have in that? Yeah.
Let's go a little deeper on that, because you've said before, you threw around some other names, right? Obviously, you knew you wanted to get to the gospel, but you thought about healthy tech or hopeful tech or something. Yeah. But in the end, you landed on the name Gospel Tech for a very intentional reason.
Yeah, I got a little cute with some of my names. I was like, how could we and at some point it felt disingenuous. I was like, our goal here isn't just to make good digital citizens. Like, that's important. There are some great groups doing that. Amazon and Google actually both have great digital citizenship curricula. And it's fine. That's wonderful. It teaches you how to remember you have a digital footprint and to be kind to others online. And you can't ever undo something you've done on the internet. Like, it's always there now, or unpost. So I thought that stuff was great. My heart was really to get to the whys of like, all right, what's motivating us? Why are we making these choices online? And really look ahead and say, all right, does this line up with who you want to become? So, short story on this. One of the best visuals I have for this is comes from my two boys. They're now 9 and 7, but when they were 4 and 2, we had a pre-bedtime tradition. and it was open the double doors in our hallway in our house, and they would stand against one wall, I would stand against another. They would get a full head of steam, run down the hallway, and just linebacker tackle into me. I have a pillow in front of me.
Why do dads do this?
Yeah, this is the best. Bed? Yeah, we exactly. Like, it never wears them out. We always like, oh, I'm wearing them out. No, it doesn't. They are so amped and sweaty. And this was like, they'd run into me, pick them up by their ankles, swing them in circles, set them down, and they loved it. So this was a nearly nightly routine. Pretty quickly, Owen, the 4-year-old, realized that he could use his size for advantage. He could knock down his 2-year-old brother and get an extra turn. So I would stop and be like, buddy, that's not kind. It's not how we treat people, right? Jesus tells us to think about how others feel, to think of others before ourselves, right? All of the wonderful biblical teaching, and it totally worked for like 4 seconds. Then he forgot and was like, who cares? Another turn. And that was an ongoing process until one fateful night, I forgot to open both doors. Didn't seem like a big deal at the time. So one door was open, the other was closed. They'd run down around the door and then tackle me, and it wasn't a huge deal. But Owen had tackled me, and I could see him doing the math. He could hear Henry coming, but not see him. And I could watch his eyes with like the older brother crazy of like, I'm going to get another turn and crush my brother's dreams. He turned to run for the door, and I was like, oh no. And if I were just to pause him real quick, I'll just ask you this. Do you like sushi? Do you ever eat sushi?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay. So have you had an edamame when you've gone like that? All right. Have you ever tried squeezing an edamame?
And it just launches?
Yes. So it turns out that if you take the head of a 2-year-old and you place it directly below your nose at just the speed of light, your front teeth act like an edamame. And I watched a tooth skip across the carpet. And I grabbed...
Who lost the teeth?
Exactly. I grabbed Owen and ran him to the bath. There's no blood. His front 2 teeth are gone. Like, they have shot out of his face. And I was like, oh, buddy, like, whoa, that is awful. Like, start taking pictures and like sending them to people because I don't know what you're supposed to do with this. And he starts, he cries for maybe 30 seconds and then he stops and then he gets like the hyperventilating cry. He's like, Dad, yeah, buddy, I want my teeth back.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, but like, first of all, that hurts my dad's heart. Like, I can't. My daddy heart wants to give you your teeth and I can't. And you can't even say teeth without your front teeth. But what I saw in this when talking about middle schoolers in tech was so many of them are just running down the hallway of life, doing what feels right, even though people they love say, don't do that, don't go there, don't smoke that, don't search that. And they're like, well, it's just fun. Like, I'm not hurting anybody. It's just a good time. And then when they get popped in the mouth by life, they go, man, I wish I could have my teeth back, right? I wish I could have a do-over. I wouldn't do it the same way twice. And so many of them then believe that because this has happened to me, it was my fault, bad things happen, now this defines me. And that has kind of been my motivation of like, no, let's bring the gospel into this, that, yeah, you've made mistakes. And yeah, like, it was 4 years till Owen got his front teeth. Like, they come in later if you lose them that early because it doesn't have the guiding front teeth. But that wasn't it was a defining moment in learning how to be kind to others and unintended consequences, but it wasn't defining in that, hey, this is who you are. I like to say it describes you. It doesn't define you. It's part of your journey, but it's not the point of your journey. And I think that that's with technology. What the gospel is intended to do is bring hope into the space of saying, all right, yes, you're a sinner in need of grace, but you're saved by that same grace, that Ephesians 2:4 of, but God being rich in mercy because of the love with which he loved us, sent his son, right? That while we were still sinners, before I even asked for it, God already provided a way. That's amazing. And then Ephesians 2:10 tells us that it's for good works, that's been prepared beforehand for us to do. And that's what we take to technology. Like, think about that. If I used just one social media platform with that attitude, like if just everyone on Twitter today believed that they were sinners saved by grace for good works and then acted accordingly, like, that would change the way the planet works. And that's just one social media platform. And I don't even think it needs to be every person. I think there can be a critical mass of people with hearts changed by grace, and specifically the grace of Christ, to be new creations and then to live out of that new creation. So my hope isn't to see kids, quote unquote, do better online. My hope is to see kids be new creations and then live from that freedom they have online. And I do believe that can transfer, and I've seen it happen, and it's really neat when it does.
And that's why it's gospel tech.
That's why it's gospel tech, to tie the whole bow for you.
Because it's always a conversation about identity.
Yeah, and that in the gospel that's the only way we can truly understand that it's not us trying to run our own lives. That's why it's not behavior management. A lot of parents start hearing conversations about technology, like, how is this different than just kind of behavioral manipulation? And the answer is that we're always pointing back to something other than our rules. Like, if good rules were enough, the Old Testament would be all we need. Those are perfect rules. Follow them. do it. Please, by the way, anyone listening to this, like follow the Old Testament to the law. That'd be amazing, except we don't have the strength to do that. And in fact, some of those rules were there, as Jesus points out, like some of the laws are there because you guys weren't able to handle the rest of the laws. Like these are capitulations to God's goodness. And so instead what we do is we repent and we are made new inside so that now we want to do what's right. And that's really the point. Is child of mine, you don't have to be more like me. In fact, that might be the problem, is that you're a lot like me. You need to be more like Jesus. And that lets us humbly now address our kids. So whatever their struggle is, that's not a reflection on us as a human or our quality as a parent. That's a reflection on this child's struggles and how we now can love them. So now every struggle actually becomes an opportunity for a parenting win. So sure, your kid struggles with gaming. It's not about fixing your kid so they quit embarrassing you. Your kid's not a problem to fix. They're a person to love. The gospel lets you have the humility to enter that space and go, you know what? I needed someone to step into my life to save me. I'm going to extend that grace to you, not because I'm better than you, but because I was first loved and now I'm going to love you. And so now every tech situation that comes up isn't a battle of wills. I'm not fighting with my kid about technology. I'm fighting for them. And sometimes, it's for them against their own will. Like they want to make mistakes. I'm not going to make that easy. I'm going to make running from God and from hope and from their purpose really hard, but I'm doing it out of the hope and love I have for them because of what God's done in my heart.
I think this is the first podcast where we've had the word capitulation.
Oh, all right. Scrabble words coming in handy.
What does it mean?
To capitulate?
Yeah.
To give up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Look at that. We're high level here on the Passion Meets Purpose podcast. I knew this was going to happen, that I was going to enjoy your story. And I really, the why that you do all this, I knew that was going to take up a full episode. And I knew that we were going to have to do part 2 because I've got like some specific bullet point questions. Like I want to get into it, right? I want to get into algorithms, social media, video games, all the stuff that you present on because you say, so we're going to do that for part 2, if you'll stick around.
Yeah, love that.
You say that when you first started talking to parents and kids about all of this, you would just give a bunch of statistics, and now you don't do that at all.
Yeah, this is correct. I mean, we're talking 3 years ago. I had to spend 40 minutes of a 60-minute talk sharing statistics about use and about mental health and about what this is doing to our kids. And honestly, I had a meeting with the director of one of the largest school districts in the state of Washington. And after 90 minutes of meeting, he looked at me and said, "You sound really 2007. You need to just get with the times." And I was like, I'm not being tinfoil hat about this. Like, I'm trying to be really, like, this is something I want to get ahead of. And now it's exactly the opposite. It's parents come freaked out and they're like, just tell me how far in the ocean I can throw this device and I'll do it. And I have to like almost argue for the pros of tech because I'm not anti-tech. I'm not a Luddite in the strict sense of like, well, if we just had less tech, we'd be better. Like, think about it. We had 2 world wars before digital technology was here. Like, the human heart is the issue, but digital technology allows our mistakes to happen faster. So I try to kind of toe that line of my talks are now, they're always pointing back to the hope of the gospel, the point of why we actually care at all. Because if there's no gospel, if we're not saved for a purpose, if we're not dying in our sins and need a savior, if there's a plan B out there that we can achieve on our own, being safe and happy is a pretty good option, right? Cell phones and video games are a pretty safe road if that could possibly be your best option, but it's not. Like for nobody, no one will find their purpose in video games specifically. There are people who are glorifying God with their design and with their storytelling and with their work. But there's a lot of people I've seen who achieve success and miss their potential, where they gain the world but lose their soul. And that's really what we're talking about with gospel tech is how can we intentionally take the hope of the gospel and then live into where we are in life. And statistics sometimes don't help us do that. They can freak us out, but I found that parents are well informed now, and now what they want is hope. What can I do? I feel like my kid is out of control. I feel like I don't know enough, which parents, by the way, if you're listening to this, you don't. Your kid's way better at technology than you. You cannot stop them from making the mistakes they want to make. All you can do is show them the hope that exposes the lies in their life about their own identity, about their purpose, about what will bring them true lasting joy, and then point them towards the only source that actually can do those things.
And we're going to dig deep into all of those specifics in our next episode. And if you just can't wait for it, good news. Nathan has his own podcast called Gospel Tech. And you've got over a year's worth of episodes. You did what? One every week. So
yeah, no, we are episode 160 something.
Then
so we've got
I'm
a couple years. No, you're good.
A couple years.
we got a couple. It's days of content for you if you want it. But all that is focused on how do we love God and use tech and raise up healthy youth in a tech world.
So you can check that out. We'll link it to it in the show notes. And then in our next episode, Nathan and I are going to talk about his personal story about how video games are not for him. And you don't make that as a blanket statement.
Nope.
Again, you are not anti-video games.
That was a hot take to be ending on. All right. Woo, we got him on a cliffhanger.
We are going to talk about that. I'm also going to ask some questions about algorithms. And I've got a teenage daughter myself. And I think sometimes once you know, like, just how manipulated you're being, it almost becomes like, oh, well, I don't want to be like a little pawn in their scheme. So we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. Awesome.
And so really looking forward to it. And thanks for sticking around.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for being here today on the Passion Meets Purpose podcast. We're going to talk again in 2 weeks, but in the meantime, if you want to do us a huge favor, obviously you know this by now, if you leave a review, it really helps others to find this podcast. It also helps us to make it better. And then you can contact us anytime at Purposely Podcasts. Until next time, thank you.